abuse is common irrespective of gender, and so it could be sexual abuse, it could be child sexual abuse, or violence, emotional violence. So the question is, what should one know while considering marriage with someone who has experienced abuse? Not just marriage, any relationship with that person, or also how do survivors navigate relationships after a certain age, mostly a marriageable age? That's the first question.
Okay, so your question is what should someone consider considering marriage with someone who has experienced abuse in the past? Okay, now you're saying with the other person who has experienced abuse. Okay, yeah, I think one of the things with the abuse is, as I told you, because it's not very often spoken, if the person has not come to terms with it, these are things that can be dark spots in the person's life and can erupt at some point of time. And therefore, I think if you know that the partner has experienced abuse, I think it's very important that you talk about it and try to come to terms with it, because otherwise, at some point of time, it can cause a relationship. See, many people go through abuse, but a lot of people come to terms with it. Okay, and they rise above the abuse, they rise above the trauma. Okay, and they really come, they are in peace with themselves. But there are people who are not able to actually rise above the trauma, and that is where the problem is. And therefore, I think it's very important that we really understand what the person is going through and talk about it before getting into marriage, because otherwise it can create a disturbance. But if the person has come to terms with it, please don't keep digging it and digging it, because you're going to create more problems in the whole thing. Yeah, sometimes the person will say, yeah, it has happened, it's in the past, I've forgotten about it. Don't say, no, it's okay, but please tell me, please go on. Don't, because then you can create further problems. Okay, so sometimes people have come to terms with it, and it's a closed chapter in their life. Fine, so you can talk about it. If you know people have faced abuse in the past, it's important that you talk about it. And how do survivors navigate relationships after a certain as I told you, I think one of the important thing for all of us to do is to, if any of us have experienced abuse, I think the first thing that we really need to do is to understand it and to come to terms with it. Because only when you understand it and come to terms with it will you be able to navigate relationships in the future. Okay, if you don't understand and come to terms with it, it will manifest itself in some form or the other in a relationship later. So I urge you all that if you know people, or if you're in counseling, or if you're in church groups, you're in youth groups, I think it's very important that we discuss this and really come to terms with it. Otherwise it can affect our relationships at a later stage.
So, ma'am, we also know that abuse is very, very common within family. So, how do we know? I mean, how do we forgive the family member, even if you don't want to, like?
You're muted.
I'm so sorry. Okay. Yeah. How do we know that we have forgiven the family member, or how do we forgive a family member who has abused us in the past, though you do not want to be in contact with that person?
I think it's something very difficult to answer, but see, I think personally, I feel that if I have to be in peace with myself, I need to forgive the other person. Because if I don't forgive, I'll never be in peace with myself. Okay, because in abuse, if you need to get out of the relationship if it's a very very bad abusive relationship. Sometimes it could be just one instance of abuse, and with that it is done. We don't experience any. But if you're in an abusive relationship, first of all, you need to get out of the relationship. It is not necessary for you to go and live with the person, be nice to the person again. No, not necessary. But within your heart and mind, I think it's important that you don't hold that grudges or that hatred, because the more you hold this grudge or even guilt, because sometimes we'll blame ourselves for what has happened. Okay, I think we need to come to terms with that. Otherwise, you will never be at peace with yourself. You'll always be in pieces. You'll always be struggling with this whole concept. I think for that reason it is important that you come to terms with what is happening. It's not a question of forgiving the other person, because some abuses can't be forgiven. They have to go to the jail or whatever it is. There's no question of forgiving, but at the same time coming to terms with it and being at peace is very important. Graham Steens, what happened? She had to come to peace with herself, and not that that person was out of jail or was not punished, but then she had to come to peace with herself. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so the next question is how to confront people who put you down for no reason, especially when they're close to you. So this talks about emotional abuse. So what are your inputs on that?
Yeah. I think you have to see, very often what happens is when there's an emotional abuse, we in turn also either we withdraw and kind of go into a shell, okay, go into a shell, or we hit out very often. Okay,
Yeah.
so yeah, that's what happens. Either you go into shell or you hit out. I think it's important that we are assertive in that relationship and very assertively talk about it and tell them this is not how I want to be treated, and I will not tolerate you using these words against me. I think that assertiveness is something that is very, very important. I still remember that when I first joined, I don't know how much of time we have, but just one small instance. When I first joined the college, there were very few women faculty members. And during one point of time, there was a strike, and some of the people who were in the strike started calling women faculty names. Okay, started calling us names and abusing us and threatening us. And so what happened is some of them, like I said, flee. Okay, flee away from the place or fight back. Okay, and so one of the things I did is I walked up to that man and looked at him in his face and I said, I do not want you to call me this. And if you call me this, I will never tolerate it. And that was the last time they spoke to me like that. So I think that assertiveness is very important.
Wait a second. What can a person do to introspect and understand areas of abuse in their life or family? It is very common that, especially people say it's like an Indian household and abuse is very common, you're beaten up. But then how do you, differentiate that abuse that happens within family?
See, I think there should be a zero tolerance to any form of abuse. There should be a zero tolerance. Yeah, I don't think we can justify any form of abuse within the family. Fine. Of course, now, I mean, there's so much of debate going on. Can the children be corrected? Can they be hit at home? Spare the rod and spoil the child. Today, children can't be hit. All kinds of things are going on. But I think that zero tolerance is something that we need to show in the family front, because that is where the children learn about it. Okay, and I think it's important for us as families to really understand what it is and how our relationships are and what is it that we are actually, what our upbringing is, and how we are violent. It does happen when you're angry, you say things, but then I think we really need to look at it and introspect on it within the family structure itself.
So when it comes to a marriage, so I remember, ma'am, like once when you were teaching us in class, you were talking about a husband who didn't want to be with his wife, and he just said his wife is insane and put her in a, institution, a mental institution. So what can be done when in-laws and husbands, coerce the wife to divorce and all of that? So what can be done when something like that is?
um, See, one of the things, at least within the Indian structure, is that whenever there is abuse, very especially faced by women, like I told you, men also face abuse, but men have more power and control. And therefore, when they face abuse, it's much more easier for them to walk out of a relationship or to, do something like that, unless it's so emotional that they're not able to handle it. But for women, because of this whole concept of dependency and the culture and the sacredness of marriage, even within the, whether it's Hinduism, the Tali, the Christian marriages, where, you say the wife has to love when she's a good wife, and the whole portrayal of the good wife who's, always there and adjusting and subjugating herself and all those kind of things. Okay. So within that context, it's very difficult for a woman when she's being forced into divorce. It's very difficult for her. But if she is in a marriage situation where she has in-laws and husbands are so abusive, and I think sometimes it's better to get out of a relationship like that rather than get stuck in the relationship and face this abuse constantly. Okay, but at the same time, to make sure in what ways she's getting out of the divorce, because if they're going to blame her for the divorce, she is mentally ill. I think she has to stand up for it and seek help before she actually takes a decision on whether to stay on or get out of the relationship.
So anybody who has ever faced abuse in the past will always have trauma, will always have PTSD. may or may not have it. But then for those who have it, how to move past the memory of the abuse, because it's always a part of you after that. So how do you move past it?
I think one of the see, always when an abuse happens, usually the victim is blamed for it, and by others, and we also have self blame, and we feel guilty about what has happened. I think one of the first things for us to do is to know that we are not responsible for what happened. I think once you do that, then more understanding comes into the entire thing, and then you come to terms with it, because it's very, very important to move past the memory of abuse, because if you don't, it will be a lifelong trauma that you're handling with, and it just doesn't affect you, it affects everybody else in any relationship that you get into later. Okay. Just one again, Abhisha and some of the others may remember this case study of a girl who was going to get married, 21 years old, comes to psychiatry OP with paralysis of the lower limbs. All the test results showed normal. Paralysis of lower limbs, so much in her subconscious, nobody knew what happened. Finally, she had to go through therapeutic treatment, and then they found that this girl was constantly sexually abused when she was a teenager. And she had not spoken about it. She blamed herself. She felt dirty about what happened to her, and that is her experience. And when a marriage was being fixed, this trauma surfaced and it manifested as a psychiatric illness. So I think, first of all, come to terms with it and understand we are not responsible for it, and then work past that memory either spiritually or through counseling services, through support, so support from an older member within the family. It has to be, some of us, see, each of us are different personalities. Some of us can come to terms by ourselves, some of us need spiritual, more spiritual, like for me it is very spiritual in nature to deal with anything that happens in my life. Some of us need counseling services, some of us need to talk to somebody. Okay, so you have to use some way of coming out of it.
This is very common. Like, I'm just giving an example with naughty students who come and, come to a new place, like in our college, and they made fun of, they're called, sorry, chinky, and, a lot of momos and China and all of that. So how to deal with people who make fun of you for your identity? I mean, such people have stereotype people of a particular region.
Yeah, I think this is a major issue that is coming up, especially now we're talking a lot of body image, and this is again related to this, that a lot of young people are coming up with issues of body image issues, especially because they've been stereotyped, or they told that you're not like this, or you're not like that, or you're not tall enough. Men coming with body image issues because they're too short, or they don't have enough facial hairs. Girls coming with body image issues. So this is something that we're seeing very, very, because we're stereotyped in a particular way. Okay, we are expected to be like this. And you look at the matrimonial columns, fair, wheatish complexion, all the stereotyping is taking place. Okay, so therefore, again, the self-image is very important. How I value myself. Unless you value yourself, nobody will value you. If you don't value yourself, nobody will value you. Please value yourself first. Value yourself, however you are. Value yourself, and when we value ourselves, we can go past all these things.
Thank you, ma'am. So nowadays, something that's very common is rising is the fact that people bully people through social media, especially, morph pictures, nude pictures, and they obviously, threaten them that, I will send it. So what can be done for this as a legal aspect also? And
yeah, I did have two slides on media and abuse, but then that's a whole session by itself. I really wish you call some good lawyer who works in this area, because this is something that young people need to talk about. I would urge you to have a separate session on this. We're seeing more and more cases coming, especially with COVID, more and more cases coming, because everybody's hooked onto the gadgets for classes, for work, for everything, even young children. Okay, and they're all caught in this. So I would urge you to have an entire session on this, and media safety, cyber safety, entire session. Maybe call a lawyer and ask him to talk to you about this. But I would urge you, be sensible. Be sensible about what you post on the website. Be sensible about what you post on Instagram. Be sensible about what you post on your Facebook page. I see people posting things like, even things like, you're very depressed today, or you're feeling this way today. Even the pictures that you post on your social media, the photographs that you post. Be very, very sensible in this area. That's all I'll tell you right now, because I don't think we can go into the entire thing right now. But there is a lot of legal provisions that are there. Cyber safety is a session by itself, and we really need to talk about cyber safety, because this is one problem that is going to be a major problem.
Uh, Ma'am, so we know a lot of them have been abused back when they were a child. So the fact that they don't come out and talk about it, it takes time. Obviously, not everybody goes and tells. So, is there any provision to take legal action for those people who've been abused in the past?
Yeah, I think there have been a lot of cases that are coming up now of people who are talking about abuse that happened in the past, and they are bringing it up and they're talking about it, and there have been legal actions being taken against them. So that is happening, and I'm sure it's possible. But just please remember that when you do this, you need to be strong enough to do it, because otherwise you're going to be reliving the trauma for yourself and the child. So unless you have come through that and you've risen above the trauma, it's very difficult to handle it when you go to, because it's a wound that you're opening up again.
Okay.
Right? Yeah, but it can be done. Yeah.
Okay, this is a very long question, but I think it has to do. Can I read it? I will read it out to you. For those of you, my mom sometimes forces me to make career choices according to her wish, but I know it's not meant for me. So when I say no to her, she becomes angry and emotional. I think the whole question is about how she wants to tell her mom and explain what she is thinking in her mind, but she's not able to. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand the question. Yeah. Um, I mean, the one thing that we need to do is really sit down and talk about it. But you're saying that she doesn't want to listen. Okay. There's one prayer that I use a lot. Okay, because there are certain things that you cannot, like even with my mother, there were so many things I couldn't change about her, and I had to go through certain things in childhood, or as a young girl. And then of course, once I was independent and I could make my own decisions, I started making different choices and decisions. And this prayer is, there are certain things we can change, and we need to have the courage to change it. There are certain things we cannot change. We need to accept it, and we need the wisdom, the serenity prayer, and the wisdom to know the difference between the two. You may not be able to change your mom because of what she went through. You can try to sit and talk to her. You can try to sit and take her out, maybe ensure that she's having a better time now, and I'm sure she will come around, and I'm sure she will talk. But I think it's important that you learn to make the right choices. Sometimes, even if it's going against your parents, you really need to make a choice for your own career sometimes. Okay, so I think that's very important.
The next question, what is a solution for emotional abuse or emotional pressure created by the family about education, like marks and all? I mean, it's similar to the one before.
Yeah. Um, uh, like I told you, talking to your parents is very important. Talking to them and making them understand it is very important. And secondly, understanding who you are and what you want in life. That's very important, because sometimes our parents may not finally understand who we are or what we want in life. And I think it's important that you really understand who you are and what you want in life, and go past this abuse. You need to rise above this abuse, because very often you can't find solutions to all the kind of emotional abuse, or like these cases that you're talking about. You may not be able to find solutions for it, but can you rise above all this and find ways for yourself and chalk out a way for yourself? That's very important. Now, this is a very important area, because we know a lot of children are undergoing trauma because of this pressure related to career and education and marks. And this is something that children are facing today. And we really need to see how we can address this, through different forums like this, to talk about it, so that more parents are aware about it and they're really able to understand this more. Okay, so I think the only solution is to talk to parents about it, try to explain to them. If it's getting really worse, then you need to meet the school counselor or the college counselor, and talk to the college counselor and see if your parents will also come to talk to somebody. Okay, that's the only solution that's there.
The next question is, I never had a steady relationship. I want all my relationships to be sexual. Is it okay to rape or kill and revenge my childhood abuser? I know she's married with a child, but when I was abused, I didn't know she spoiled me. Now I am aware. instead of waiting for God to punish her, I'll punish and seek forgiveness. Is that fine?
As I told you earlier, no, that whenever there is abuse that we have experienced, there is a lot of trauma we go through. So in this particular question, for instance, you will see the kind of trauma and the anger that is there, the anger and the pain and the hurt to take, it's just not hurt. It's something much more than that. It's talking about revenge, it's talking about killing, it's calling about punishing. Okay. Can I kill? Can I rape? Can I revenge? What can I do to somebody who spoiled my life? So there is a lot of trauma that I see in this particular question. And I feel that this person who's asked this question, if it is a true life story, please see a counselor. Please seek help, because by killing the other person, it's not going to solve the problem, because you're still going to continue living with this anger or this feeling of revenge and this rage that is going around within you. I see a lot of there's a rage that is going in. It's just not simple anger, it's just not simple hurt. It's much more than that, where the person is saying, I want to kill the other person, I can't wait for God to punish. Fine. So if this is a real life question, I would urge this person to seek help, okay, and to seek spiritual help, to seek emotional help, and definitely you need to come to terms with what is happening. Yeah.
So the next question, I'm getting where this question is going. Like when we are close to someone, we tend to crack jokes on them. It could be sexist. It could be something that has to do with their weight or the way they look. So does that mean we are abusing them?
See, one of the things that when I do gender classes, I always say that, for instance, suppose Abhisha's class, okay, the peer groups, and sometimes peer groups tease each other. But the same teasing, suppose Abhisha is walking, towards the station. If there's another guy at the bus stop teasing her, it amounts to harassment. Okay, so sometimes within a group, within a peer group, this kind of a teasing and this joking can take place. But please remember that if what you're saying is hurting the other person, then it can amount to abuse. Okay, so that is something that we have to be very sensitive to that. Okay, some people can just brush it away and just keep going. Okay, but some people can be really hurt by it. Fine. And so you have to be very, very careful, especially if there are sexual tones to it or sexist, racist comments that we make. Be very, very careful about these things that you say in a group. It is not all right. It's not all
right. What are the signs of a person who has gotten healing from an abusive relationship? Because people tend to say, I'm fine. But how do you, say that they're completely fine?
When there is a sense of wellness, okay, when I say there's a sense of wellness, spiritual, emotional, physical, social, okay, so when there's a sense of wellness, when there's a sense of self-worth, right, I feel that the person has been healed from that abusive experience that they've had. I think that's very important, that sense of wellness.
Should we inform or not to our spouse to be about the abuse before getting married?
Not necessary, I would say, especially if it is something that has happened in the past and you've come to terms with it and you've handled it. There is no need, because I tell a lot of young people that when you start a relationship, it starts from that day onwards. Okay, and from that day onwards, you share and care, and there are no hiding things and things like that. But a lot of things in the past, sometimes you buried it. Those are dark spots in your life that you don't even want to talk about. It is not necessary that we share it, because it has nothing to do with this person. So you're not hiding, you're not cheating. Okay, unless that had some other implications that the person needs to know about. For instance, suppose there was some some rape incident, and because of that there's some gynecological problem, then the person needs to know. Okay, you can't hide it. But otherwise you don't need to share, because that's a past. It doesn't belong to the present. Fine. That's my personal opinion. You may differ, but that's my opinion.
So since you spoke about self-neglect, ma'am, what activities fall under self-neglect, and to what extent should we care, and to what extent should we not care?
Yeah, self-neglect is something that I've seen quite common in people who've been in abusive situations, who've not come to terms with it, or where healing has not taken place. In the form of, I've seen people who are, when they're upset, cut themselves, bang, hit, do not eat properly. It can go up to even eating disorders. Okay,
Yeah.
so self-neglect, like not eating, can go into. So we find people who've been abused in abusive, especially child-related abuse, adolescent-related abuse, coming with eating disorders. Okay, we find people with body image issues coming with eating disorders, or with somatoform disorders like dysmorphia, for instance. Okay, so this self not having self-respect or the self-abuse is something that's very important that we really need to take care. How many of us, when we get angry with somebody or with your mother or your spouse or something, the first reaction is lock yourself in a room, hit yourself, I won't eat, not eat for days together, don't have a bath, sit and cry. Why are we doing it? Okay, that's a sign of, again, self-abuse. You're abusing yourself. So I think self-care is very, very, very important, because our well-being, our mental well-being, our social, our spiritual, our physical well-being is very, very, very important for us. We live in a world which is so pressurized. We live in a world that is so challenging. Okay, that is not as carefree as it used to be so many years ago. The challenges of life are increasing. COVID now, another challenge. Okay, so self-care is very important. The whole sense of wellness is very important, not just in abuse, in anything that you are in. That sense of self-care and well-being is very, very important.
Wait a second, ma'am. Yeah, so sometimes for those who've been abused, and when they go and approach their parents and they say, see, this person did this to me from this family, they do not believe it. Parents don't usually believe it, or they take it as, the child is simply saying something. So how do we make them understand, especially small kids who are not able to be more vocal about what happened to them?
Make whom understand, the child or the parents, you're saying?
What?
Make whom understand, the child or the
parents? The parents as well as the child.
Yeah, parents, of course, a lot of awareness programs and talks on this is very important for parents to understand that it can happen to children. Okay, and the child, of course, like you said, small children may not directly tell you, but they will tell you things like, every time that uncle comes home, that child will refuse to come out, or will go and hide under the bed. Okay, and the mother will say go, and the child will say, no, I don't want to go with this mama. Mama wants to take you out. No, I don't want to go. Okay, so I think these are signs and symptoms that it may not be real sexual abuse or things like that, but when a child says the child doesn't want to go repeatedly, okay, we have to definitely be sensitive to this particular issue as parents. And I think we really need to do a lot of awareness programs and talks with parents.
Will God forgive me if I want to, or kill my abuser and then ask for forgiveness?
I think you have to answer this question yourself, because by taking another life, it is not a solution to the problem. And I don't know about God. God is a forgiving God. God is a loving God. Okay, so but killing the abuser and asking for forgiveness is not the answer, because you're still going to live with this trauma. The trauma is not going to go away. Let me tell you that. Please believe me. Whoever is asking this question here, please believe me that this trauma is not going to go away. This intense pain that you're feeling is not going to go away. It is going to get exaggerated more and more. Yeah, you're going to feel it more and more. The pain is going to become more and more. The anger is going to become more and more. Fine. So that's not the only solution to it. Yes, that person can be legally punished. Please ensure that the person is legally punished. Okay, ensure that the person is taken before the court of law and is punished. But us killing that person is not going to solve the problem. Okay.
There's one more question. How do you heal from trauma? I think you discussed it a little.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
This healing from trauma is something that we have to do. Actually, you can even think of a session on healing from pain and trauma. It'll be really good if you really can get good inputs, spiritual, emotional healing, spiritual healing, all this, because many of us are not able to deal with trauma, and we are not able to get that healing from trauma. I think this is something that we really need to look at, because there is a lot of pain, and we need this healing from trauma. That's important.
How do we identify an abuser before becoming a victim? What are the signs and possibilities that this person might be an abuser?
Yeah, when the yeah, excuse me. The signs could be anything. For instance, a person who's a child abuser, okay, you will find a lot of signs of manipulative, a lot of signs of trying to get attention, sweet talk the person into it. And then when they're coercing you into something, we just think they love us, that's why they're doing it. For instance, intimate partner violence. What happens in intimate partner violence among young people today? The partner tells you, no, it's okay to have sex, and you say no, no, it's okay, because anyway I'm going to get married, anyway we're going to be careful, anyway we love each other, anyway I've promised you this. So they go on. We don't see it as abuse, we don't see it as abuse coming, but that is abuse. That is abuse. Okay. And so these are, so you have to keep looking out for these things. Very often we miss the signs, and of people trying to be very nice to you, giving you gifts. For instance, at workplace, when gifts are being showered upon you, be very careful. Be very careful. Fine. So these are all things that we have to look for, when we are in a relationship. And also you'll find this entire savior syndrome. We think that we can save people by being in a relationship. That person is violent, that person is drinking, the person calls up and says, you didn't talk to me, so I did this to myself. If you don't do this, I'm going to cut myself. All these are signs of abuse, but we don't see it. We think we are saviors, oh, no, don't do it, please, I'm with you, I love you, and I will come, no, I will do, let's do this. All these are signs of abuse, but we don't see it coming, and we just fall prey to all these things. We think it's love. We think it's love. It's not. Nobody who's in love will tell you, if you don't do this to me, I'll kill myself. It's not love.
Is partiality and abusing the same or different? If different, why? I think they're talking about favoritism here.
Favoritism. Yeah, if in the favoritism you're abusing the other person, okay, you're showing favoritism to a child, or you're showing liking, and in that thing, when you're abusing, so always in favoritism, when favoritism is there is some amount of abuse also, because you're saying, you're looking at one child and telling this child, see, that child is like this, you're not like that. It is a form of abuse, because when you're doing it, you're putting somebody else down. You're constantly, bullying. For instance, bullying is a form of abuse. Okay, so it is a form of abuse because you're putting somebody else down.
So this question, the girl's brother happens to have abused her, and she went and communicated this to a teacher. And when she said it, her mother was like, it is her fault. She wasn't dressed properly. So how do I help her?
If you are the teacher, please talk to the mother, because you're saying it's still going on. You need to talk to the mother. You can't let this go on like this. Or the girl has to speak out or report about it. If the girl is willing, let her report about it.
I think she told this to the teacher, and the teacher, okay.
No, I'm saying the teacher needs to speak to the mother.
Yes.
Or the girl, you need to report. This has to be reported.
Are abusers themselves abnormal? Also, not just abnormal. There was another question where I'm adding that question with this is, can we sympathize or empathize with an abuser who's done something, like, because they might have a backstory that might, make them abuse someone else. So how do we deal with that?
Yeah, I wouldn't use the word abnormal, but abusers are people who really have either a past history of being abusive or a personality that is very abusive in nature, okay, or an upbringing that has made them abusive, and they're always allowed to be abusive, hit, throw, things like that, and it has been tolerated. So that's how they are, and therefore they need help. They need help. That's what I would say. It's not a question of sympathizing with them and things like that, but they need help, and if they're not willing to take help, then you can't be in that relationship. Okay, so if, for instance, a spouse is abusive or the other spouse, and if that person is not willing to seek help and change, you cannot continue in that relationship.
Yeah. Ma'am, this is the last question, so I'll just read it out. A man divorced his wife 10 years back, and 1 minute, yeah. A man divorced his wife 10 years back and has 2 children with her. She left her children with the husband. This man struggled to raise them, facing a lot of abuses in the society. And now some people are saying to cancel the divorce and stay with that woman again. Is it good to engage with that woman or the sake of children? For the sake of children, can't a man raise children without any abuse?
Of course, a man can raise a child, and a divorce that has taken place 10 years ago, and I do not know what the reason. See, I can't say whether you can go back because I don't know what the reason is. Because if the reason was, abuse, or there was some other problem, there's no point of going back into the relationship just because society is telling you, oh, you're a man and you can't raise a child. Fine. And it's not true, because I always say, no, masculinity and femininity are qualities that are there in men and women. A man can also be caring, loving, child rearer, carer. Okay, a man can also be a caregiver. Our society has made women caregivers and men the bread earners. That is how society has made it, but that's not true. Men can be as caring as women, and even more caring sometimes in relationships. Okay, so I don't think after 10 years to go back is a sensible thing to do, but I'm not able to tell you because I do not know what the cause of the divorce is. But when a divorce has taken place, something has gone wrong. That's how I see it. And therefore, you can't go back into that relationship again just because somebody's society is telling you you can't bring the child, or struggling to face what is happening around you. I think it is possible. He can get help from other support people within the family. Get help from parents, grandparents, uncle, aunts. I think it is possible to bring up children in a very caring environment.